taqdim etiladi. Katta rahmat.
Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli seminar qatnashchilari. Good morning, dear Mindaugas, dear Oliver. Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli Xatamjon Abdurahmonovich, hurmatli seminar qatnashchilari. Good morning again, dear colleagues, dear experts. My name is Aziza Abdurahmanova. I am the coordinator of the National Erasmus Plus office, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's seminar. Let me welcome the representative of the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education, of the State Inspectorate for the Supervision of Quality in Education under the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and our colleagues from the European Union delegation to Uzbekistan. It's our pleasure to see all the participants and the representative of the universities from all country regions and the national higher education reform experts. So welcome to this next technical assistance seminar, which is organized jointly with the support of the Ministry, State Inspectorate, and supported by the National Team of Higher Education Experts. Up to date, we have organized jointly in total 16 technical assistance missions on different topics with the support and participation of the distinguished European experts from different EU member states. For this technical assistance seminar is the third one. We have already organized 2 seminars. The first one in March with participation of the Finnish expert Annika, and she provided her expertise on development of joint programs and joint degrees. In June, we have also organized the seminar, the second one, with participation of the expert who shared his experience on digitalization of the university. Both topics were demanded by the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education. So for your information, both previous and all events of the National Erasmus Plus office have been recorded, and they are available on our YouTube channel. Today's seminar is again the virtual one, and we hope very much that the next one will be offline, or at least in the blended format, and you will enjoy your direct communication both with the invited expert and also with the networking opportunities within the university community. Today's seminar is dedicated to the teaching and learning, key challenges in quality assurance. Actually, just very briefly, that the European Union has been providing support to national higher education reforms for more than 27 years, starting in 1994 with the Tempus program. Since 2014, the higher education cooperation has been intensified within the Erasmus Plus. So you had the universities of Uzbekistan had the opportunity to cooperate within the joint projects, international credit mobilities, as well as international seminars, conferences, and target seminars like today's one. It was to emphasize that this specific expertise was requested by the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education and supported by the National Team of Higher Education Reform Experts. The Erasmus Plus Technical Assistance Missions provides targeted assistance to the ongoing modernization of higher education. So it's response to ad hoc request, ad hoc demand of the ministry. It's my pleasure to welcome today our distinguished European expert, Professor Oliver Vittori, from University of Vienna, who is invited to share his experience on the topic of this seminar. Very briefly about him, so we are very pleased to have him today. Dr. Oliver Vittori is Dean for Accreditation and Quality Management, as well as the Director of the Department for Program Management and Teaching and Learning Support at the Vienna University. He holds responsibility for the overall international accreditations, manages program portfolio, university program portfolio, and central teaching and learning policies and processes. He has been working as an expert in the area of quality assurance and higher education development for more than a decade, and cooperated with more than 15 different countries, with the various international higher education agencies, including European University Association, ENQA, UNESCO, EU Share. He has been teaching courses on public management, research methodology, organizational behavior, and evaluation theory. As a research associate at the Institute for Organization Studies, he has authored dozens of publications in the area of organization theory and organization culture, quality assurance, teaching and learning, and curricular development. So he has been invited as a European expert, and he was involved in a variety of European projects in Erasmus Plus and Horizon 2020. And currently, which is very important for us, he's coordinating the teaching and learning activities of the Engage EU, the European University Alliance. So very pleased to welcome our distinguished professors. And now I'm coming to the next poem. So today, I mean in November, we are at the start of the new call for proposals within the new phase stage of the Erasmus Plus program for 22-27, which provides more extended cooperation opportunity for European universities, for universities worldwide. And Kudrat Khan, he will present some novelties of these new calls coming later on during the day. Now it's my pleasure to give the floor for the welcoming speech to the first deputy head of the State Inspectorate for Supervision of the Quality in Education under the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Khatamjon Abdurrahmanovich Ketmonov. Domla marhamat.
Rahmat. Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli tadbir ishtirokchilari, hurmatli janob Mindavus Karbauskis, Aziza Karimovna, janob Oliver Vittori hamda konferensiya tashkilotchilari. Fursatdan foydalanib, tadbir tashkilotchilariga do'stona taklif va doimiy yaqin hamkorlik uchun o'z minnatdorchiligimizni bildiramiz. Ma'lumki, so'nggi yillarda O'zbekistonda ta'lim oluvchilarni qo'llab-quvvatlash, ularga sifatli ta'lim sharoitlarini yaratish va oliy ta'lim tashkilotlarida mehnat bozori tomonidan e'tirof etiladigan kadrlar tayyorlanishini ta'minlash borasida islohotlar ko'lami kengaymoqda. Bu islohotlarni amalga oshirishda albatta xorijiy tajribasi inobatga olinmoqda. Sababi, ta'limda biz yuqori sifat, innovatsiya va integratsiyani ko'rmoqchimiz. Shu bilan bir qatorda ta'lim oluvchilarga beriladigan diplom va darajalar oson tushunilishi va solishtirilishini ta'minlamoqchimiz. Bu orqali oliy ta'lim tizimini milliy va xalqaro miqyosdagi jozibadorligini oshirmoqchimiz. Aksariyat davlatlardan farqli ravishda O'zbekistonda har bir ta'lim darajasi uchun alohida vazirliklar mavjud. Shuningdek, mamlakatimizda prezidentimiz tashabbusi bilan ta'lim sifatini nazorat qilish davlat inspeksiyasi 2017-yilni noyabr oyida o'z faoliyatini boshladi. Bu hukumat huzurida ta'lim jarayoni sifatini nazorat qilish, uni shaffof baholash, xalqaro tajribani o'rganish va amaliyotga tatbiq etish bo'yicha yagona mustaqil organ hisoblanadi. Ta'lim inspeksiyasining asosiy vazifalari sifatida yurtimizda ta'lim tizimining xalqaro hamjamiyat bilan integratsiyasini ta'minlash bo'yicha takliflar ishlab chiqish, uzluksiz ta'limda pedagog kadrlar sifati, ta'lim muassasalari faoliyatini davlat attestatsiyasidan va akkreditatsiyasidan o'tkazish, ya'ni tashqi sifat kafolati nazorati. Bunda inspeksiya nafaqat tekshiruvchi organ, balki kamchiliklarni bartaraf etish, yuzasidan takliflar va yo'l xaritasi ishlab chiqilib, uni muvaffaqiyatli bajarilishini ham koordinatsiya qiladi. Faoliyatimizning ilk ijobiy qadamlaridan biri sifatida tizimli yondashuvlar va 20 dan ortiq rivojlangan davlatlarning ta'lim to'g'risidagi qonunlari o'rganilib, o'tgan yili mamlakatimizda yangi tahrirdagi ta'lim to'g'risidagi qonun amaliyotga joriy qilindi. Mazkur yangi tahrirdagi qonunda yetakchi xalqaro tajribalar asosida oliy o'quv yurtlarining akademik mustaqilligi, kredit model tizimi, qo'shma dasturlar kabi xalqaro talablarni hisobga olgan holda ta'lim tizimining barcha javharlarini qamrab olishga ham harakat qildik. O'zbekistonda Yevropa tajribasi asosida milliy malakalar ramkasi ishlab chiqildi. Milliy malakalar darajasi va deskriptorlariga muvofiq kasb standartlari shakllantirildi. Hozirda oliy ta'lim tashkilotlarida ham shu asosda o'z ta'lim dasturlarini ishlab chiqib ishlari boshlandi. Albatta, milliy malakalar ramkasini samarali ishlashini ta'minlash maqsadida ta'lim sifatini ta'minlash tizimini ham modernizatsiya qildik. Ya'ni universitetlarni akkreditatsiyadan o'tkazish jarayoni nafaqat davlat standartlari, balki xalqaro standartlarga ham muvofiqlashtirildi. Ilg'or xorijiy tajribalar, ya'ni Janubiy Koreya, AQSh, Angliya, Avstraliya, Yevropa ittifoqi kabi davlatlarning tajribasi va zamonaviy ta'lim siyosati ustuvor yo'nalishlari talablari asosida ta'lim tashkilotlarini akkreditatsiyadan o'tkazishning yangi institutsional tizimi ishlab chiqildi va hozirda amaliyotda shu institutsional tizim asosida faoliyat olib borilmoqda. Bugun respublika oliy ta'lim muassasalarini milliy reytingini 4-marta mana biz e'lon qilyapmiz. O'tgan yilgi reyting natijalariga ko'ra biz tegishli qarorlar va chora-tadbirlar ishlab chiqilib, uni ijrosini nazorat qilib monitoring qilish natijasida biz bir qator bu sohada ham ijobiy natijalarga erishdik va ijobiy natijalar kuzatilmoqda. Shuni faxr bilan ta'kidlamoqchimizki, 2020-yilda ta'lim inspeksiyasi Yevropa oliy ta'lim sifatini ta'minlash assotsiatsiyasiga, ya'ni INQVAga kuzatuvchi sifatida qabul qilindi. Kelajakda bizning maqsadimiz Boloniya tizimiga bosqichma-bosqich o'tish, INQVAga to'laqonli a'zo bo'lish, INQVA reyestriga kirish, xalqaro konvensiyalarga qo'shilish orqali O'zbekiston universitetlari tomonidan berilgan diplomlarning xalqaro miqyosda tan olinishiga erishishdir. Yuqorida keng ko'lamli islohotlarni amalga oshirishda Yevropa ittifoqi universitetlari bilan hamkorlikni yanada takomillashtirishga alohida e'tibor qaratmoqchimiz. Bunda xalqaro hamkorlarimizning tajribasiga tayanib harakat qilamiz. Kelgusida O'zbekistonning Yevropa ta'lim hamjamiyatining ajralmas qismiga aylanishida va yurtimizda ta'lim sifatini oshirish bo'yicha chora-tadbirlarni amalga oshirishda Erasmus, Yevropa ittifoqining O'zbekistondagi delegatsiyasi xalqaro ekspertlarning strategik va amaliy jihatdan qo'llab-quvvatlashlariga umid qilamiz. Nutqim so'ngida hamkorlarimizga kelgusidagi faoliyatlariga ulkan samaralar tilagan holda hamda 2 kunlik bo'lajak seminarimiz ishiga muvaffaqiyatlar tilayman. E'tiborlaringiz uchun rahmat.
Katta rahmat.
Rahmat. Hurmatli Xatamjon Abdurahmonovich, biz mazmunli ma'ruza uchun minnatdormiz. It's my great pleasure to underline that we are really very grateful for the continuous support for the support of the State Inspectorate, and personally for the support of the head of Inspectorate, Professor Tashkenbayev Ulukbek Nimatovich. And I would like to emphasize that what has been said by Professor Ketmonov is that university autonomy, ECTS introduction, development of the national qualification frameworks is really the topics which are completely and considerably covered by Erasmus Plus activities in Uzbekistan. And thank you very much, Khatamjon Abdurahmonovich, for your comprehensive introduction and welcoming speech. The role of the State Inspectorate and the overall improvement of the quality of education in Uzbekistan is considerable, is vital, and is widely recognized by international organizations. Rahmat. It's my great pleasure now to give the floor to the head of the political, press and information section of the European Union delegation to Uzbekistan, our friend, because he's an academic, Mindaugas Katsarauskis. So please, Mindaugas, the floor is yours. Something is wrong with your, Mindaugas, something is wrong with your microphone.
And now, can I be heard? No?
Yes, you can be heard now.
Yes, it's okay now? Okay, so I will start my short intervention. Thank you very much for inviting. It's our pleasure to be second time on this kind of occasion. I believe this is one of the softest and one of the best served European Union projects, not only in Uzbekistan, but all over the world. The Erasmus, that you can always win the mind and hearts of the population. Let me welcome you on behalf of the European Union, all the representatives of universities from all regions of this beautiful country, and the national team of higher education reform experts, and of course all our colleagues from state institutions of Uzbekistan promoting the reforms in this important sphere of quality assurance. I'm happy to see you in the TAM seminar in order to learn and discuss teaching and learning, key challenges in quality assurance. It is pleasure to me also to welcome the European expert, Professor Oliver Vittori from Vienna University of Economics and Business, who is invited to share his extensive experience in the topic of the seminar. I have to say that, as it was mentioned before, this topic is personally very close to my background, and I was closely involved and actively involved in promoting quality assurance and even drafting the legislation in this domain. It is worth mentioning that the new Erasmus program's budget for 2021-2027 is totaling 26.2 billion euros, compared with 14.7 billion euros for the previous financial cycle of 2014-2020. With this very substantial increased budget, Erasmus Plus will be even more inclusive, more digital, and even more green. Today, we are at the start of new Erasmus Plus program for the next 6 years, 2022-2027, which provides more extended opportunities for cooperation of European universities with all countries of the world. The next Erasmus Plus call for proposals will be launched in the second half of this month. It is worth to mention that all Erasmus Plus actions are aimed on support of the policy developments in the field of higher education system of Uzbekistan, and today's event should hopefully contribute to this as well. I strongly believe that this event lasting those 2 days will give you tools and models for further developing of your respective institutions by improving teaching and learning and management process at your universities. Our colleagues from the National Erasmus Plus office are always at your disposal for more detailed information and overall help and cooperation opportunities with the European universities. Availing this opportunity, I would like to thank the Uzbekistan Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education, the team of National Erasmus Office in Uzbekistan, and our dear experts for the great efforts and contribution to awareness raising of wide range cooperation options, supporting the development of ties and people-to-people partnerships with the European Union and other regions in the world. I will wish all participants very interesting, challenging, inspiring, and useful seminars and exchanges. And thank you very much for your attention, and have a pleasant and very fruitful day.
Thank you very much for your inspiring speech and the welcoming, Mindaugas. We are very pleased to see you always as a colleague in our seminars, in our Erasmus Plus activities. Thank you. Thank you for underlining the role of Erasmus Plus and the future perspectives of the program, which have been also realized by the National Erasmus Plus office, being an observer for the yesterday's EU-Uzbekistan Cooperation Committee, that the more synergy opportunities should be explored between the EU-funded projects and Erasmus Plus project. I think we will provide more options and undertake more efforts to strengthen this interaction between projects. Thank you, and we rely on your continuous support, Mindaugas. Thank you very much. And now, concluding the introductory part, I would like to thank the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education for their continuous support. The first Deputy Minister of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education, Comrade John Hamidovich Karimov, have forwarded his greetings and apologized. He has not the opportunity to join us because of the important governmental task coincidence with our event. He always recognized the contribution of Erasmus Plus program to the overall development of higher education reform. And again, our special thanks goes to the State Inspectorate for Quality of Education, to the Ministry, to EU delegation, to the National Team of Higher Education experts. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, to Kudratxon Bakhadyrov, who will present the Erasmus Plus activities, ongoing activities in Uzbekistan, the impact that has been already achieved by previous phase of Erasmus Plus, and he will present also some novelties of the program. Marhamat Qudratxon.
Assalomu alaykum. Katta rahmat. Ekran ko'rinyapti. Demak, hozirgi taqdimot aynan Erasmus ming bor uzr, men tilla o'zgartirib qo'ydim. Katta rahmat. Demak, davom etamiz. Bu yerda asosiy maqsadimiz Erasmus Plus dasturi doirasida nima o'zgarishlar bo'lish kutilyapti va hamda oxirgi o'tgan 6 yillik davrda bu dastur O'zbekiston oliy ta'lim tizimida qanchalik o'z ta'siriga ega bo'lganligi haqida qisqacha to'xtalib o'tishni maqsad qildik. O'zi umuman ma'lumot berib o'tadigan bo'lsak, Erasmus Plus dasturi haqida bizda demak bizda bu Yevropa ittifoqi tomonidan taqdim etilgan loyihalar, stipendiyalar va mana shu doirasida oliy ta'limni rivojlantirishga qaratilgan dastur hisoblanadi va navbatdagi dastur bu 2021 va 2027-yillarda amalga oshirilishi rejaga kiritilgan. Xabaringiz bor, bu dasturimiz 90-yillardan demak Tempus bilan boshlangan va undan keyin Erasmus Plus bo'ldi. Mana hozir ham Erasmus Plus dasturi sifatida davom etib kelmoqda. Xo'sh, biz mana shu o'tgan oxirgi 6 yillik davrni tahlilini amalga oshirganimizda bir qancha muhim jihatlarni o'zimizga belgilab oldik. Bunda bizga Oliy va o'rta maxsus ta'lim vazirligi va tegishli barcha vazirliklar, ekspertlarimiz guruhi yaqindan yordam berishdi. Hisobot tayyorlangan, buni biz veb-saytimizda olib o'qishingiz mumkin bo'ladi. Demak, asosiy o'zgarishlardan bular oliy ta'lim muassasalarida birgalikdagi dasturlar, bir qancha yo'nalishlarda, shu bilan birgalikda oliy ta'lim muassasalarida o'qituvchi professorlarimizni malakasini oshirish, Boloniya jarayoni elementi bo'lgan kredit tizimi, ya'ni Yevropaning ECTS tizimini bosqichma-bosqich kiritishda mana shu dasturlarimizni ta'siri sezilarli bo'lganini ko'rishimiz mumkin. Shu bilan birgalikda loyihalar doirasida har bir loyiha ishtirokchisi, ya'ni oliy ta'lim muassasalarimiz o'zlariga amalga oshirilayotgan loyiha dasturida bir qancha laboratoriya jihozlari va boshqa jihozlarni olish imkoniyatiga ega bo'lishdi. Hozirgi kunda biz bemalol aytishimiz mumkin, bir qancha oliy ta'lim muassasalarimizda ilg'or laboratoriya jihozlari bor, mana shu dastur doirasida olingan va ular juda ham malakali kadrlarni tayyorlashda yordam berib kelayotganini alohida belgilashimiz lozim. Va bir qancha loyihalar doirasida ularning muhim natijalari sifatida maqolalar, kitoblar chop etilgan hamda daraja unvonlarini, doktorlik darajalarini olgan o'qituvchi professorlarimiz alohida o'ringa ega. Mana navbatdagi slaydga e'tibor qaratadigan bo'lsak, yangi dasturda 2021-yilda boshlangan, yil boshida bizda Erasmus Mundus hamda janmana yo'nalishlari bo'yicha tanlovlar e'lon qilinganda, shu ularning natijalarini kutib turibmiz va navbatdagi tanlov, ya'ni xalqaro kredit mobilligi hamda oliy ta'limda salohiyatni oshirishga yo'naltirilgan loyihalar uchun navbatdagi tanlovni biz mana shu oyning oxirigacha kutyapmiz. Bunda bir qancha o'zgarishlar amalga oshirilishi kutilyapti. Agar biz hozir oliy ta'limda salohiyatni oshirish loyihalari haqida ko'radigan bo'lsak, asosiy maqsad hamkor davlatlarda oliy ta'limni rivojlantirishga yo'naltirilgan, ya'ni aynan mana shu davlatlar oliy ta'lim muassasalarini ehtiyojlaridan kelib chiqqan holda loyihalar shakllantirilishi va ular maksimal darajada shundan foydalanishi maqsad qilingan. Va qo'shimcha yangi jihatlar sifatida to'xtalib o'tadigan bo'lsak, bu yerda yordam berishi bir qancha turlari shakllantiriladi, ya'ni bu mablag'lar bilan ham loyihalari hajmi bilan bog'liq va shu bilan birgalikda mablag'ni amalga oshirish soddalashtirilgan usulda amalga oshiriladi. Bular haqida to'liq ma'lumotlar tanlov e'lon qilinishi bilan amalga oshiriladi va bu yerda yana alohida e'tibor qaratishimiz kerak. Boya aytib o'tilgandek, oliy ta'lim muassasalari, ya'ni mahalliy oliy ta'lim muassasalarida milliy ustuvor yo'nalishlar emas, balki umumiy mana ekranda ko'rib turganingizdek ustuvor yo'nalishlar bor. Bu raqamlashtirish, ekologik jihatdan yashillashtirish, ya'ni biz qilayotgan ishlarimiz va hokazolar asosiy, ya'ni mana eng muhimlaridan bittasi bitiruvchilarni kelajakdagi ishlarga kirishlarini yana ham oshirish asosiy yo'nalishlar belgilab olingan va har bitta oliy ta'lim muassasasi o'zlarining ehtiyojlaridan kelib chiqib ustuvor yo'nalishlar doirasida loyihalar tayyorlash maqsad qilingan. Mana endi tanlov boya aytib o'tilgandek bizda mana shu yilning noyabr oyining oxirligiga qadar tanlov e'lon qilinishi kutilyapti. Ikkita yo'nalish bu xalqaro kredit mobiligi hamda oliy ta'limda salohiyat oshirish loyihalari bo'yicha. Bu tanlovlari bizda oxirgi muddatda, demak fevral va mart oylariga belgilanadi. Undan keyin topshirib bo'lingan loyihalar baholanishi va natijalar avgust, ya'ni keyingi yilning avgust oyida chiqishi kutilyapti. Loyihalar keyingi yilning oxirida boshlanishi rejaga kiritilgan. Asosiy mana sizlarga aytmoqchi bo'lgan masalalarimiz shu edi, chunki grafikdan chiqib ketmasligi uchun sal tezroq harakat qildik. Bu taqdimotimiz albatta bizning veb saytimizda bo'ladi, kirib tanishib chiqishingiz mumkin. Bu ekranda esa xo'sh, bizni kontakt ma'lumotlarimiz, ko'proq ma'lumot olish uchun biz veb saytimiz va Facebookdagi yoki boshqa tarmoqdagi sahifalarimizdan bemalol olishingiz mumkin. E'tiborlar uchun katta rahmat. Jazakallah. Demak, tadbirni davom ettiramiz. Bu tadbirimiz 2 kunga mo'ljallangan. Boya ham aytib o'tildi, bu birinchi kunimiz boshlanishi. Hozir kimda kim mana shu hozirgi kunda biz ko'rib turibmiz, ayni vaqtda bir qancha ishtirokchilarimiz, asosan oliy ta'lim muassasalari ishtirokchilari, alohida aytib o'tmoqchimizki, 2 kunlik tadbirda to'liq ishtirok etgan ishtirokchilarimizga albatta sertifikat taqdim etiladi va taqdimotlarimiz, tegishli ma'lumotlar barchasi boya aytib o'tganimizdek bizning veb sahifamizda e'lon qilinadi. Demak, endi ijozatinglar bilan navbatdagi so'zni tadbirimizning asosiy mehmoni, asosiy spikeri professor Vittoriga beramiz. Professor demak bizda hozir ta'limda an'anaviy muammolar va yangi yondashuvlar haqida taqdimotlari bilan boshlaydilar. Marhamat professor.
Thank you very much, Gudakant. That was impressive how quick you were with your own presentation. I would never have thought you managed that in 5 minutes. That was impressive. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's, as I wrote in the chat, it's still quite early morning here in Vienna, but I know you're already feeling the urge to have lunch. So I'll try my best to keep in time here. It's a great pleasure being here with you, although being here means only online, and I think that's still a bit of a sad thing. I've been to Kazakhstan and I've been to Kyrgyzstan, but never to Uzbekistan. And now I missed one of the opportunities to go there, and I hope there will be others. And as today is all about learning, I already started some learning on Uzbekistan. And, you know, I grew up in the most western part of Austria, next to Germany and Switzerland and Liechtenstein. So if you have ever heard of Liechtenstein, very small country. And I learned only this morning that there's only 2 countries in the world that have a certain characteristic together, and it is actually Liechtenstein and Uzbekistan. And I don't know if you know what you have in common with Liechtenstein, very thousands of kilometers apart from it. Does anyone know? Okay, I see a lot of shaking heads. It was also a very, very surprising trivia for me. Liechtenstein and Uzbekistan are the 2 only countries in the world which are surrounded by other inside states, so states that have no access to any sea. So in a way, that means this must be the 2 most central countries in the world, because they're only surrounded by other countries, and only those countries then will be neighbored with countries with some access to the sea. What is important for me today is Kuraktan and Aziza were very clear that this should be as interactive as possible. But in order to make that work, I need all of you. So I will try my best to keep it interactive, but it also means I need all of you interacting with me in some part. So if I don't mind if you use the chat, or if you wave your hand, or if you raise your virtual hand, or if you just blurt out. Kuraktan established some rules, but I'm never worried in a group with 100 participants that everyone is going to shout out at the same time. But I need you to react to me, because otherwise that's going to be a very boring exercise. Me doing a lot of talking with myself, which is not a nice thing to watch. So please, whenever the opportunity arises, please step in and answer things, and try to also give me your own view. That would be the one thing I would kindly ask all of you. And the second thing is we've agreed beforehand on the RAFT program, Kuraktan and myself, but this workshop is supposed to be for you. So it's less about, and in particular because it's so much about learning. So I want to make sure that at the end of the workshop, you go out with the things you need or that are of interest to you. So I'll be more than happy to make changes. I've prepared presentations, I've prepared some things, but I'm more than happy. And let's take a break every once in a while if there are different things you're interested in. If there's too much focus on teaching and learning, because that's what I'm focusing on today, knowing that so many of you are teachers. And we've heard this morning about all the things going on in your country, your national agency applying for ENQA membership and everything. We can talk a lot about ENQA and external quality assurance. I've been doing work on that for more than 15 years now, but most of the time that's not that relevant and interesting to teachers. Still, if you feel that you want to talk about something else, please just let me know again in the chat or in any other way, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions there or change the input and do a different presentation. And last but not least, before I start, a big thank you to my interpreter. I'm always amazed how they work. I know we are supposed to work in a team, but it's really, for those of you not speaking English, I completely rely on the interpreters doing that. My interpreter I got this morning is fantastic. I'm pretty sure the others are too. So a very big thank you for the work you're doing there. And if you need me to slow down or anything, please also let me know. I know that I'm very often a very quick talker. Good. So are we good to start? All right, good. I see a few of you nodding. That's helpful. Thank you. I'll just share my screen because that's one of the things we still have not resolved without screen sharing. Actually, we're working at a big project at my university now because I'm getting tired of Zoom and Teams. So we're working on a project with virtual teaching classrooms and virtual reality avatars. Let's hope we make some progress with that soon, because that means we don't have to stare at all these small screens in the future all the time. Good. As Gurakan already mentioned, I'm going to focus today on some issues, some challenges, some things that are, from my point of view, hindering us to go forward, to move forward with this focus on learning and how quality learning, because this is something that is the heart of the European higher education area, this pedagogical inclination moving from teaching to learning. Now, I've always argued this is not about pedagogy, this is actually a political imperative. Student-centered learning is not a didactic concept, it's not a pedagogical concept, it's a political concept. But the things hidden in that are very much of interest for in terms of pedagogy and didactics. Now, I'll just let you read the cartoon. I'm sorry, it's in English only, but if maybe your interpreters can help you, if need be, to translate that. Please do, please do. Okay, thank you, perfect. So this actually brings me to our first part of interacting. I mean, reading this cartoon, understanding this cartoon, what does it have to do with our topic today? What does this have to do with challenges when it comes to teaching and learning? Does anyone have an idea? How do you read that cartoon? What can we learn from that cartoon? And I know it's very alluring to do your emails or to some meetings in parallel to the online meeting. That's what we have all learned in the last 2 years. But still, if any one of you could step up and say there's something and share your thoughts on that, I'd very much appreciate that.
Yes, Professor, it's very interesting cartoon. So there is a process, but there is no result. I mean, the positive result.
Right.
Right.
Right. So the reason, thank you, Gurakan, the reason why I chose this cartoon is because it demonstrates very nicely how sometimes as teachers, we don't really think enough about what actually people then do in terms of learning. So our idea of teaching is we have what we want to tell them, we have what we want to show them, we do that, but making sure that people actually learn something, knowing what they learn, is something entirely different. So, and that's what I'm going to focus on today in terms of the challenges I want to talk about. And the first challenge I want to start with is this one. I would claim that teachers know too little about learning. Many teachers know a lot about teaching, but they know too little about learning. Now, apologies for those of you coming from the field of educational science, or if you are researchers in psychology or something, there are exceptions to that rule, which does not mean that the people doing research on that always apply that nicely to their own teaching. But overall, I would still say that because we never educate teachers on learning, they know very little about that. Now, before we go a bit deeper into that, and you will realize very soon it's one of my habits to tell stories through pictures. So I've chosen 4 pictures that show different understandings of what learning could be. Yeah, you might already be very familiar with this. So here we have a picture of a mouse learning how to actually cross the labyrinth and move on to a bit of cheese. There's another picture of a computer processor. a picture of a child playing with Lego, constructing things, and a picture of a couple cooking together. Now I'm showing all those 4 pictures to you again. The mouse would be number 1, the computer processor would be number 2, the child playing with Lego would be number 3, and the couple cooking together would be number 4. And I'm going to unshare now for a moment, just very briefly, because I don't see the chat while sharing. I would like you now to use the chat and let me know which of those pictures, the mouse, the computer processor, the child playing with Lego, or the couple cooking together, which of those pictures, 1, 2, 3, or 4, comes closest to your own understanding of learning. And please just type it in the chat. Yes, excellent. There's already one. Good, thank you. Please, as many as possible of you, just write the number in the chat that. Very good. But there must be more. We're almost 100 participants. Thank you. Excellent. And it's only 5 answers yet. Great. Growing. Very good. There seems to be a quite clear preference for the child playing with Lego. And there's the couple. I'll just wait a few seconds more. Some of you might still, if it's for me, it's also perfect. You're right. That's also about learning. If you prefer combinations, then write the combination. Learning is also always about bending the rules, not just following the rules. So all right, thank you. So we have, okay, I see here from Eugenie, we even have a 1. Good. Overall, we have a pretty good mixture here. And when I share my screen again, we have a pretty good mixture here. So a majority is saying 3, but we have now seen preferences for all 4 of the pictures or the understandings of learning. And I did not choose them accidentally. So actually, every one of those pictures stands for one big learning theory. Now, I'm not going to give you a lot of lectures on learning theories, but in order to move beyond this challenge of not knowing enough about learning, I'm afraid for at least 5 minutes, you'll need to indulge me, and we need to delve a bit into the issue of learning theory. And there is a lot of research on learning, but still, when it comes to big theories on learning, arguably, there is not more than 3 or 4 big theories that have become canonical. The picture with the mouse, of course, famously stands for behaviorism. We'll talk in a minute what we can take from behaviorism and what it actually means as a learning theory. The picture with the computer processor, this one stands for cognitivism. The picture with the child playing with Lego stands for constructivism. And the 2 people cooking together that I've chosen to symbolize socio-constructivism. Now, very big words, very abstract words. Yeah, it's part of science that we create very big words for very simple things. Let's move forward and see what we can do with this. And there's actually where I've chosen the words again. So very briefly, because I don't want to give you a lecture on education theory. And my background actually is I'm from organization theory. I'm from organization science, from sociology. So this is not my original discipline either. Now, those four theories are still the ones that every scholar, every student of educational science knows about. And they actually, they are big. Some would argue parts of them are very much outdated, but I hope I can show you later what we can take for them. And each of those theories has to offer at least one element. If we take that into account, it's going to make all of our teaching much better. Now, behaviorism, that's the oldest one of those theoretical paradigms. And behaviorism is very much connected with names that you might know from, from maybe not from your studies, but from high school or whatever, Pavlov and Skinner. Behaviorism is very much about a stimulus, something you set, and then people, animals, just reacting to that stimulus. And you might remember that, this is an example that basically every high school student across the world learns, the famous Pavlovian dog. So with this famous experiment that if the stimulus, ringing a bell, is connected long enough with providing food, the piece of meat, to the dog, then after a while, the dog will start to salivate and his mouth will start to water, even if he hears the bell ring and there is no meat anywhere to be found. So that's a very famous experiment that very much demonstrates the basic idea of behaviorism. There is some kind of stimulus that leads to some kind of reaction. And Skinner, with his famous experiments on mice, and that's also why I chose the picture, with the mice and the labyrinth. And so if they move through the labyrinth, they get a piece of food. That's part of the whole learning theory there. You provide rewards, you provide incentives, and that instills some kind of behavior in the learners. That's also why it's called behaviorism. Behaviorists are not that much concerned with anything that happens in the brain. That's not what this is about. It is about conditioning. It is about creating a certain kind of behavior, a certain kind of reaction. Now there comes the later theory on cognitivism. And this theory is more about what happens in the brain. Cognitivists, and it's very much in the word, they are more about the patterns of understanding, the things that happen in the brain. That's also why I chose the computer processor, because from a cognitivist point of view, the brain is often compared to a computer. You have some things going on there. You try to program the brain in a way. That's what the teacher would then do. Yeah. So you try to imprint, to program the brain of the student, of the pupil, of the learner. You want to create some patterns of dealing with information. And this is the understanding of learning behind that. In constructivism, that's the one of the newer theories. When that one emerged, this was more about, and it's the same across all the disciplines. This is when philosophers, when educationalists started to realize what happens in our brains is very unique. No one of us sees the world exactly the same way. There is no real world that we all see or experience in the same way. What we create as a reality, how we experience the world, that's very much up to ourselves. It's very interesting. I mean, if you think about that, even if you see the color blue on the screen now, because that's what I chose for it, no one of us is seeing the exact same blue. Because ultimately there is no exact same blue. It's what the receptors in our eyes transport to the brain. It's what our brain does with it. So that's very interesting. And it means, and that's why I chose the picture with Lego, it means that learning in this theory is very much about creating a world, shaping a world. You have to find your own ways of dealing with things. Learning means you construct, your own knowledge, you construct your own realities. It has become a very fashionable learning theory in the last decades, but it's also a very difficult learning theory if you think about it. What do we do if really everyone has their own reality? How do we come together there? And I can assure you, I'm coming to the closing of this short theory input. Socioconstructivism, which I chose as the fourth theory, this is very much, it's similar to constructivism, but the basic idea there is we create reality not just for ourselves and on our own, but we create it together. We create it through speaking to each other, we create it to working with each other, so their realities are created together. And this is very important because, I mean, we're living in a world with a lot of challenges where people need to collaborate. We wouldn't have any vaccines for COVID-19 if we hadn't had hundreds of experts across the world working together, learning together, creating knowledge together. Socioconstructivism is very much about that. Now, you could ask yourself, why the heck is he boring us with these theories? I mean, it's nice to get a bit of a theory input once in a while. We're academics, but it's actually quite boring. And what is the relevance of it? Coming back to your numbers, many of you found the child playing with Lego, the constructivist, the most appealing one. But not only. Some of you were more moving for the behaviorist picture, some of you for the cognitivist picture. My take on it is, and I actually owe a huge debt here to a great colleague of myself, Jacques Lanares from the University of Lausanne, who is a former vice rector there. And I actually owe this bit of insight to him. Those theories were kind of growing on each other. So behaviorism, as I said, is the oldest one. Socioconstructivism is the newest one. But that's not to say that we can throw away the older theories. What I see and what Jacques Lanares has discussed several times when he was giving talks and speeches is, from each of those theories, we can take something away that will make our teaching much better and that helps us to actually improve the learning of our learners. In behaviorism, where it is about those impulses, from this we can learn the importance of feedback. And of course, we already know the importance of feedback. But if you now think that learning is not possible without feedback, that learning is not possible without realizing if you have done something correct or not correct, or if it has moved forward to a goal, then I think it puts a much stronger emphasis on this. There's a lot of discussions on feedback. And I've heard a lot of, there's teachers at my own university, I would say, oh, of course I will give feedback. If the students come to me and ask for it, they will get feedback. But with this kind of approach, it means that the students can't learn unless they come from themselves and ask for the feedback, because this is an essential part of learning. From cognitivism, we can learn how important application is. And I will talk about that a bit later in more detail. But if things are not applied, then our brain is not forming the necessary connections. Then it's not stabilizing in our brain as something that we really can or do. There are some theories out there who argue that unless we hear something at least 40 times, or we repeat something several dozen times, it doesn't really form a connection within our neurons. It does not establish itself as something that we have truly learned. So this is something and this is very important again talking about my own university, because you might all be much better in teaching than the teachers at VU are. But our own teachers are so often obsessed with cramming very, very much knowledge into tiny courses and making sure that the students always hear the latest and the newest and the most diverse bits of information. But the problem is, if students don't do anything with this information, they can't really learn. They hear a lot of different things, but that's not learning, that's listening. From constructivism, we can take reflexivity. So the child playing with Lego, if this child doesn't pause and think, what fits together? Why did it work? Why do the two stones only go together in a certain way? Why did my tower fall after the 57th stone? Do I need to make it broader at the foundation of the? Without this reflecting on things, again, learning is not effective and is not possible. So there is this big element that we need as well. And social constructivism, to end with that, is all about interactions. And again, without interacting with each other, without interacting with anyone else, there's big social learning theories, also Banduras and everything. Without this, it's also, again, very difficult to learn. It's very difficult to learn from each other, but it's difficult to form a connection to the world after all. So this is coming back to the idea of the first challenge. This is where I would again challenge most teachers. We know too little about that. We think too little about that. And this is usually hindering us to actually move forward with becoming better teachers, but more importantly, with helping the students to become better learners. Now, there is one theory that is actually connected to cognitivism, and I chose that in particular because I felt this is something that if more teachers were thinking about that, again, the quality of our teaching, the quality of our learning would grow a lot. And that's the so-called cognitive load theory. Again, a big word. And in this case, because you might get tired of just listening to me, and that some things are more difficult to convey through pictures, I've decided to put that also on the slides in terms of, you will also get the slides from the organizers afterwards. And if you want to read a bit more on that and more in detail. So the cognitive load theory emerged in 1991. And why did I choose it? Because I think, especially in higher education, we are always working in a way against that theory. It is based on the work of two researchers, Sweller and Chandler, and their basic assumptions for their theory are that the capacity of our working memory is limited. Now, this assumption is not just a theoretical assumption, that has actually well proven. So our working memory, if you want to say like the RAM in your computer, the working processes, the working memory can only retain 7 ± 2 things. Yeah, that's connected to short-time memory. That's something that the things you can keep in mind actively for a certain time of period of time, that's very limited. Between 5 and 9 things is not a lot. Yeah. So what does our brain do? Let me just take a look at the what does our brain do in order to deal with this limitation? Because of course the world is so complicated and it's so fast that we would be constantly even in the danger of losing our lives if our brain hadn't found a way of working around that. And so our brain has found ways of producing patterns. So in this theory, learning means constructing a schema. During the learning process, knowledge is transferred from the long term to the working memory and then linked to new knowledge. No, it's actually, sorry, there's a typo. It's transferred from the working memory to the long-term memory. And it's linked to new knowledge. And through this, we always form what they call a chunk. Yeah, information is built into chunk. So this is how we build the building blocks of our own memory of how we actually learn in the long term. Now the problem is that our brain needs support for that. It needs support for structuring that. The less energy, the less work we have to do in order to structure things for ourselves, and the fewer things we have to structure in parallel, the more effectively we can learn. So the core message for university teachers very much is we need to structure learning materials in a way so it's possible that learners don't lose capacities for constructing that knowledge, meaning the more ready-made those things are, the more pre-structured they are, the more teachers help them already to focus on the important things, the easier it is for students to actually build those chunks. And this is indeed very important, because from this point of view, information can be retained far more easily if it's also linked to existing knowledge. And again, this is not what we usually do in higher education. In most universities, and I've been working with universities on 4 different continents and in very different countries, in most universities, teacher A does not know what teacher B is doing. Teacher A does not really build on the course of teacher B, because they have their own courses, they have the freedom of teaching, the freedom of research, they want to convey things. And very often we don't build curricula in a way that things are really building up on each other. We don't build in the necessary redundancies because we're not aware how important that actually is. We think the more we give them to think about and to learn, the better it is for them. But ultimately, it's not. So what are the practical implications? Talking a bit about practice for time being. What you can do in order to help students with that is you can provide step-by-step sample examples, showing them how others have been solving the same problem. That's not to say they should learn by imitation and by repetition, but if they, for an exam, for an assessment, whatever, if you show them some examples of what can happen, if you show them an example for anything that you want to convey them, then it's easier for them to match that and to link them also to their own experience. It's important to match the visual and the auditory channel. So don't talk, this is very simple. You shouldn't talk about things that are not in line with the things you're showing them at the same time. Because our brain, there's this big fantasy of us being able to multitask, but actually the brain is not able to multitask. So what it does is it constantly and very quickly switches between different activities, meaning the more information you give them through different channels at the same time, the more the brain is occupied, the working processes are occupied with dealing with those things, the less you can actually really learn and store in your memory. I'm also, with regard to time, I would suggest not going into more detail with those examples, but just to hand them over to you later with the slides. But again, if these are at least 2 things I would like to touch upon. If you give too many explanations, and that's also counterintuitive, then that's actually not helping, especially the more advanced learners. The more you explain, the more you talk. That's also why I'm going to stop talking now. The less they can actually store that information for a longer period. And some similar things hold true when it comes to degree of difficulty and complexity of tasks. So coming to the end of this first challenge and how to deal with this challenge, there is one last input nugget I want to share with you, and that's the experiential learning approach, following the word of Kolb and other lectures. And because this afternoon will also be about pedagogical models, some of the best universities in the world, a lot of them US-based, but also a lot of them in Europe, have actually started focusing more on experiential learning, on making sure that what students learn is not just happening in the classroom, but it is linked to concrete experiences. Now, there's lots of different ways of doing that. This cycle here starts with the concrete experiment, with the concrete experience, and then it's kind of embedded into learning. But you can also go the other way around. There is some interesting work being done on how you build in internships. There is universities like the Northeastern University in the US. They have thousands of students literally working through cooperative projects with partners from outside university across all the disciplines. And that's a big part of their experiential learning. In the university where I come from, and I'll stop that now so you can see me again, at the university where I come from, the Vienna University of Economics and Business, we have shared with our own lecturers examples, for example, in accounting, you can talk about the ethics of accounting at length. You can talk to people and show them how important it is to keep certain standards in mind. Many of you might be familiar with the Wirecard scandal that is shattering Germany, but not only Germany, because of all the failings also of the accounting firms. So we can show this as abstract examples. We can talk about ethics, but that doesn't mean that the students are experiencing that. And one of the most interesting pieces of experiential learning I found in the recent past is a couple of teachers and researchers who actually brought students to prison. And what do the students do there in prison? Well, they were talking to accountants who were sent to prison because of fraudulent behavior, because of not acting according to the law or to the professional standards. And by talking to them, by hearing their first person accounts, that was much more effective, and it had a much more lasting effect in the students, because this was really experiencing what those people were feeling and their regrets, their stories, whatever. That has a much better impact than any theoretical lecture on ethics would have. So summing up my first part and making then a quick break for you to actually ask your questions if you want, there is a lot of evidence why we should talk and think about a bit more about learning theory. It's not the only challenge I see, but it's one of the biggest challenges, and that's why I talked the longest about that. Quick break. And then my suggestion would be, if you have anything you want to throw at me in terms of a question, or, as I said, bending the rules, not just following them, you see something different or you want to add something, please do in the chat or in person. I'm very happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's very interesting, the presentation. I have a first question, if you allow me.
Please do. Please do.
Yes. This field, I mean, the learning theory, I'm very far from this, but I have realized by your presentation, you have, in my opinion, you have limited the learning by only 4 aspects, which is cognitivism, there were constructivism, some 4 aspects. Is it only approach, one of the approaches, or it is a law of nature? I don't know.
No.
or there are other different approaches of learning.
Right.
And it's just interesting. As people who is the first time is listening about the theory, can be just their understanding limited with only 4 these aspects. So probably there are other approaches as well.
Very good question, Kultan. Thank you very much for that. No, of course, I choose those 4 learning theories because they're the biggest one and the most prominent ones, but there's dozens of different learning theories, and all of them make a case for what we should think about, how learning works, what we can then. So in order to reduce complexity, and because it's difficult to listen on screen to read someone talk about theories, I choose those 4, but my message was not about stick to those 4 theories. My main message is, if we want to become better teachers, if we want to deliver more quality, then, and I come from quality assurance originally, no quality assurance survey, no external accreditation is going to make our teaching better. Our teaching is only going to become better if we think more about teaching and ultimately think more about learning, because that's what the goal of teaching is, that people learn. And so knowing more about how people learn, what they need to take into account, is a key equipment for any teacher. That was the main message there. And the 4 elements I choose, like feedback, application, reflexivity, and interaction, are just because they are so simple and we always talk about them, but we never really think about how deeply connected they are really to learning. And what happens if we don't provide feedback in the right amount or at the right time? What happens if we don't give students a chance to do an exercise on something, but just tell them about things? Then we have a problem.
Thank you very much. Now it's clear. I will switch to Uzbek to communicate to our auditory, if you do not mind.
Please do.
Demak, katta rahmat savol taqdimot uchun va savolga javob uchun. Marhamat, ishtirokchilar, hozir hammada mikrofon o'zinglar boshqarishinglar mumkin, mikrofon yoqilgan. Bemalol mikrofoninglarni yoqib savol berishinglar mumkin yoki chatda yozishinglar mumkin. Professorimizni taqdimoti bo'yicha. Bizda auditoriyamiz odatda juda ham faol, lekin bugun negadir savollar hali shakllanmagan. Marhamat. Bizda hozir mana savol, from your own experience, what is the most influential theory of learning?
Thank you. That's a very good question. No, please do. That's a very good question. I think the theory that was influencing myself the most is the theory on constructivism, because that blew up in my mind when I realized that all people are seeing things differently, learning things differently, constructing their world differently. But it helps me to understand a lot about the world, but it's a very difficult theory to actually apply to your teaching in your classroom, because how much can you individualize learning and teaching? So I think this is very much also about reflection for a teacher. It's very influential for me, but it is arguably also the hardest to apply.
Rahmat. Demak,
Good.
Demak bizda
Gurukhan, if you don't mind, it would be important for me because it might also be that everyone is now either bored to death or has been completely thrown off their game by this input. So it would be very helpful for me if you could give me a short indication if what you have heard so far is relevant and going on with directions, or if it's not, and that will help me to adjust the presentation. So everyone, you have at the bottom of your screen, you have these reactions that you can do, and you can raise your thumb, but there's also other reactions you have, like you can tick the box with this green, or you have this red sign with an X in it. So could you please give me a green light, a green sign, if you feel, all right, I'm on board with this, this is helpful, this is at least partly interesting. And could you give me a red sign if you feel the last half an hour was very difficult and you feel a bit bored by it? So either a thumb up or a green sign if you're all right, and a red sign if you feel I need to do something different. Good. And please, especially those who need me to do something different, give me the red signs and don't just stay silent, because otherwise you're going to be treated to more about that.
Hozirgi davrgacha adashmasam, agar ko'pchilik nomidan javob berish noto'g'ri bo'lsa kerak, men o'zim aytadigan bo'lsam, universitetda o'qituvchisi sifatida men uchun juda ham muhim bo'lgan yangi ma'lumotlarni oldim va o'ylaymanki, navbatdagi darslarga tayyorgarlikda bu olingan bilimlarim juda ham qo'l keladi. agar ishtirokchilarimizda qandaydir fikrlar bo'lsa yozishlari yoki mikrofonlarni yoqib bemalol fikrlarni bildirishlari mumkin. Lekin hozirga qadar mana bizda belgi berish juda ham qulay bo'lyapti. Professorga katta rahmat. Men shaxsiy fikrim, men uchun juda ham foydali bo'lyapti bu taqdimot.
Good. Thank you very much. There is another channel because not everyone wants to disclose it. Some of you are already writing me privately in the chat. I promise you I will try my best to answer that during the lunch break, your lunch break. If you can also let me know privately in the chat if you feel you would need something different or do something. I think that's also more easy than doing it in public. Good. We have 10 more minutes before you go to your lunch break. We will continue our talk about challenges after the lunch break as well. But there's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you before you move. And I hope you still have the energy to move on. We have now only talked about this first challenge, and that was the one that teachers don't know enough about learning. Now, from all my work, not only as a teacher.
Bitta savol tushib qoldi chatda. Professor til o'rganish bo'yicha ekan.
Okay.
Chatda ingliz tilida o'qib beraman. Hi everyone, if we approach to language learning in terms of numbers and statistics, is there a suggested number of lexical units, grammar rules, etc.?
All right. Now, thank you for that question, but I'm afraid I'll have to hand that over to the colleagues here in the room who are actually experts in linguistics. So if I had known that, I would have brought the head of my teaching development unit because she's actually a lecturer in linguistics and knows about language teaching. I don't know anything about that. So I'm afraid I can't tell you anything about I barely understand what lexical units are. I do understand what grammar rules are. So I'm afraid I can't answer that. If any of the colleagues in the room can answer that, I'll be very happy. And maybe something I need to disclose. There is a lot of specialized didactics for specialized disciplines. There's a lot of discourse on that. There's special journals for each discipline on the didactics there. I'm not an expert in most of those fields, so we can talk about some discipline-specific things, but I have to admit I'm not at all knowing about all of them. So my apologies there. If, however, I suspect if it's helpful for you, I could hand over that question to my head of the teaching development unit, and if you send me your email address, I'll make sure you get an answer in writing. Good, thank you. And by the way, I'll just share my email address in the chat. So you all have it, and you're all cordially invited, of course, to contact me about any questions after today and tomorrow, because I also realized that sometimes we need a bit more dialogue than those formats allow us. Good. Just briefly moving on, and I promise I'll not go over your lunchtime, but I at least wanted to introduce this problem before we move to lunch. So one of the core problems I always see with academics and teaching is the content problem. And I try to symbolize that with these big bookshelves. Of course, today it's not even fashionable even more to just read the books. We have all these online databases and different other types of media, but the problem remains in all of our disciplines. The new knowledge we create is, of course, far too much to convey into any program or any teaching. What happens? We always have so much we want to talk about that we cram our courses and programs full with knowledge and with content. And now coming back to the learning theories about which we have already talked, that might be nice from the teacher's point of view because you have so much you want to talk about, but it's not effective from the learner's point of view because you can only learn and store so much. And if there's new information coming in all the time, it makes it less likely, not more likely, that you keep that knowledge. So talking about that problem and a few solutions there is, and this now might seem familiar, and now for once you might see something where learning outcomes come in handy. I do believe as teachers, there is a couple of solutions of how to deal with this problem. And one of them is to consequently orient ourselves at the learning outcomes. And if you take a look, learning outcomes are hardly ever about content. But if we really want people to learn certain skills as outlined in the content, then our course needs to be built in a way that they can learn that. And they don't learn that by us talking to them for hours and hours and hours about the content in the textbooks or somewhere else. We can do that differently, and I'm going to show you ways of how to do that. But consequently, orienting ourselves at learning outcomes is a major step forward. As is the theory I was just sharing with you, we have to bear the cognitive load theory in mind. We have to bear in mind that the knowledge needs to be structured. There can only be so much that we can do in terms of explaining and new information. People need brain breaks. Yeah, that's actually a rule I'm now kind of hurting myself. We know from research that on average, an input should not last longer than 15 to 20 minutes. Now, this would be a problem for this online workshop. That's why I need to talk a bit longer. We can't just have only 15-minute sessions. But overall, we know from research, we know from experience that learners can only listen so long attentively and learn concentrated, focusedly for so long. There's people who can do better. There's always people above average. But on average, they have a problem if an input goes beyond 15 to 20 minutes and contains more than 3 or 4 core messages. I'll talk about that after the lunch break a bit longer. We have to align our courses across the curriculum. And that means that's what I was already talking about. It's not everyone for themselves. Students learn a program, they learn a curriculum. They don't learn a series of individual courses. If we want to reduce content, if we want to deal with the content problem, then we need to make sure that later courses know about the content in the first courses, repeat content there, reduce their own content, and again, make sure that at the end we reach the program level learning outcomes, not convey as much knowledge as possible in this. And this is something I'm going to talk about after the lunch break a bit more. And it's a good strategy to move the content acquisition. So what students are learning outside of the classroom, not doing that all about the talking, not doing that in the classroom only. You see, these are 4 simple principles, 4 simple strategies, and already, of course, it's just a visual trick, but already the book room doesn't look as crowded anymore, that the content has been reduced. And I think this is part of my message and my last message before the lunch break. And now following that message myself, stopping cramming you full with content, but reducing content is one of the core things we need in order to make learning more effective and more high quality learning. The program actually would now call for a lunch break, and we should keep that lunch break. And after the lunch break, it's written in the program, activating your prior knowledge for half an hour. Now, for 2 reasons, I'm going to change the program. A, I played a little trick on you. We already tried to activate that knowledge. And that's also what I tried to do through my questions here. So we don't do that with an exercise. But the other thing is, because we can't do it with breakout rooms or anything else, and there's 100 people in the room, we will not make sure or be able to make sure that everyone gets to share what they already know. So if you would all agree with that, after the lunch break, I'm going to continue with the format we have started, trying to bring you in, but also continue with delving into the challenges that we have started today. Good. And with this, Kudrakon, as Master of Ceremony, I'm handing back over to you. and you might give people who want to give them instructions about the lunch break.
Katta rahmat, professorga alohida rahmat mana shunday qiziqarli taqdimotlari uchun. Biz belgilangan rejamiz bo'yicha ketyapmiz. O'ylaymanki, barcha ishtirokchilarga professorimizning taqdimoti qiziq bo'lyapti. Xuddi mana shu linkda qolishinglarni iltimos qilamiz. 1 soatlik tanaffusdan so'ng onlayn qolishinglar ham mumkin yoki alohida kirishinglar ham mumkin. Davom ettiramiz bu yig'ilishimizni. Professorimiz aytganlaridek, kelgan joyidan barcha bilan guruhlarga bo'linmagan holda, ya'ni bitta shu guruh o'zida davom ettiramiz. Hozir endi tanaffus, ya'ni tushlik uchun tanaffus iltimos qilardik. O'z vaqtida barcha ishtirokchilarimiz o'z ekranlarini oldida bo'lishlari. Katta rahmat.